Yeah, I mean, I started by going to some KW classes, and from there, I started to see this whole other world. And I had been focused on selling, but also investing. And I was, running a P&L, and I was probably one of the only guys in that brokerage running a profit and loss statement. So it just was a natural thing to come over to Keller Williams, which was much more business focused than other brokers. I've been at Keller Williams now, almost 8 years. We've always been client-centric. And I think we really doubled down on that recently. I mean, we have 1,200 reviews on Google, and that's helping to drive what we do. And those reviews are all positive because of what we do that's above and beyond compared to other agents. Whether you need staging for your home, whether you need repairs done on the home, whatever it is that you need to get the most amount of money for that home, we're gonna do it. And I think doubling down on those strategies, making sure that whenever a buyer comes into that home, they see something, we want to make sure that they're not seeing something that they have to fix up, that they have to do. We're taking care of all those little things so they still stay in the moment of when they're buying that property. So for us, it's really about doubling down on all those issues. In a sense, we're problem solvers for our clients, to figure out what has to happen in order for them to get the best outcome. Well, I mean, it was a great opportunity. When William talked to me about, bringing our two teams together, now with that, there's a ton of change that goes along. And there's a lot of differences in culture. I mean, we had our culture, he had his culture, and so we really had to navigate those two things. So I think the most important thing is how do we blend the culture, and I think we figured that out as we went at the beginning. That was one of the biggest things, is having a cohesive culture, and from that we've really become, our culture is really about empathy and accountability, and I think those can exist in the same organization. And making sure that we're providing that for the agents, whether our Director of Operations, Tracy, and all the agents on this team, that's what we're standing for, meaning how we interact with each other is got to be positive, it's got to be uplifting, and then at the same time, we have to have standards for accountability in order to make all these things work. And if we have the standards for accountability and we can hold ourselves to that, then the empathy is easy, but the standards are still there, so we're not making, oh, well, this person gets this, and making adjustments for individuals, and we can keep it running in a way that makes sense. We have a great database of people, and we want to maintain those relationships, and if nothing else, strengthen those relationships. So we'll have client events, calls to those people, and we have to maintain and reach out through that database in order to grow the business, right? That's the number one goal of any agent, right? At the same time, we're trying to bring new people through the door, whether it's sign calls, whether it's other portals, other lead generation systems that we have to use in order to kind of put those two things together. Any business must have those two things in real estate in order to be successful, especially in our current market, where we may have people that after May of 22, or let's say August of 22, where 50 to 60% of our business was buy-sell business. Now all of a sudden people with 3% mortgages, they don't want to do that, right? So that combination, you must bring in new business. You must then reach into the database and find the people in the database and the people they know that want to do business and just go deeper. I think the first thing, you have to create that database. Now the problem is most agents think their database is like 20 people, when by the time they get through the system where we want them to do, it should be at least 200. You should be able to get a number of transactions. Now Gary Keller would tell you, you ought to get 20 transactions from a 200-person database, right? If you're working it correctly. That may or may not happen in the current market, right? But at least that can give you a base, and then from there are the other generation systems that we have that come into that. I mean, that's what's gonna work for people and help them make that. But getting them to realize that, because most of the time they come in, it's almost every single time like, oh, I only have 20 people. Okay, well, let's go through this process, and after that, tell me how many you have. And then making sure they go back, have the conversations, understand whether they're on the bus, right? If they're on the bus with you, then you want to pour into that database. If not, then you got to find some other people to go into it. It's hard too, because I think a lot of businesses are run and there's accountability, but sometimes there's no empathy. That doesn't mean you can't have accountability. It means you have to have the empathy to talk to the person about that with accountability. And then part of that empathy is also making sure you're willing to hold them to the accountability that you're putting together, because that's what's in their best interest for them and of course for the team. I mean, let's face it, real estate, while it is a simple business, it's not easy, right? And I think a lot of people have to figure out whether this is the business for them. And if this is the business for them, then great. Let's make sure we hold you accountable and that so that you can do great things in this business. I think my favorite one of all time was actually my first buyer agent ever on my team. He was the guys on our brokerage here today. I'll just say it's Eladio Serrano. And he's still like a brother to me. And he was working as a welder. We got him trained up. He was working as a welder and he was like, I can't go back and do this. And I'm like, great, well, here's what you need to do. And he just went out and did it. And the funny thing is, about 3 months in, we gave him a little, what we did is, like, I talked to his wife and we stole one of his work boots. And we took this work boot and then we put it on this little pedestal. And it's still in his office today. And we screwed the work boot to this pedestal. It was like, basically said, like, never going back, and just like, you know, let him know that he had made it. That was one of the best feelings in the world. To someone that, even we're talking now, 11, 12 years later, still such a great friend, even though he's not on the team at this point. You know, to have that change and have the opportunity to make that change in someone's life is great. There are certain numbers you really want to know all the time. You want to know median price. You want to know what the inventory is like. You want to know what interest rates are like. You want to know what the trend is in each of those. I remember it kind of depends upon the market. Now, what was interesting back in like 2020, 2021, we were tracking inventory like every week. It was so low that for people it made such a difference to know, hey, there's 400 homes on the market as opposed to 3,000. And so those type of numbers, right now we're looking at median price, and we're going back to the peak of median price, which was in Salt Lake County in May of 2022, and we're comparing that to what that's looking like every year. Now, the interesting part is, like, this past year, at a certain point, we almost got back to that high price, and now we've pulled back. Now, is there seasonality in that? Yes, but knowing all those numbers and knowing why that happens and how that's attached to interest rates, and you can chart that with the interest rates and show your people and then show the story of what's going ahead. We know the Fed has now started their loosening cycle, right? So now we know that the trend is towards lower rates, but the question is, what's that volatility look like? And explaining that to everyone. So for buyers right now, it's having that conversation about, look, we know this trend has started. You may not see this trend right now in rates because rates are still high, but this could be your opportunity for you to now buy, and then whether it's 6 months, a year, or 18 months, to then maybe refinance and get a lower rate with 20 to 30% of the transactions that are not happening every month. We know there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand, and if you're waiting for rates to go down by 1.5 points in order for you to buy a house, guess what? That's probably you and every other person out there. So what do you think is going to happen to prices when that happens? So just knowing that data so you can have that conversation in an intelligent way and give them the opportunity for them to make a decision that is hopefully right for them and their family, that is what we mean by knowing what's going on. So you can give them the opportunity to make hopefully the best decision. And right now, in our mind, that seems to be the best decision to make. Look, can you buy now and then use this interest rate later to bring that payment down, as long as you can make sure you can afford it right now? Because the last thing we want to do is put someone to something where they're stretching so much to make that payment right now. And of course, that's not going to fit everybody's box. Coming from an investor background, I think that was the most important part for me. I had a ton of knowledge about real estate and how real estate investing worked and all of those type of things before I became an agent. That's been really, really beneficial to me, because then I learned all the parts of it in terms of being an agent. What's surprising to me is how few agents, either maybe they know something about real estate, but they don't know anything about sales. It's really trying to figure out how to teach you about real estate and teach you about sales, right? And so I think investing is one of the best ways to learn about that, because it becomes, if investing is important to you, you're gonna learn all those things. And learning about real estate, learning about houses, learning about what's important when you buy a house as far as inspections, what's not, all those different little things go into the equation. And if you can marry that with the sales skills necessary to become a really good agent, that is the best thing. And I think that's what we're trying to do on our team, is give people those skills. They have to put in the work, though, to learn a lot of that stuff, and there is no shortcut to that. right? I mean, we can help them do that, but they've got to read some books, they got to, go through a bunch of trials and tribulations to kind of figure that out. So I think that's been the best thing for us. So killers with a conscience means that's what we're looking for, right? Someone who is willing to do what it takes, but, or I should say, and is client focused. Now, there are a lot of people in sales that can be killers, but unfortunately in our business, if you lack that conscience, you can't be on our team. Because it is just as important, if not more important, when it comes time for you to tell them, hey, you know what, I really think you shouldn't buy this house because of blank, 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 right? That's more important than you getting that sale. And if you don't understand that, that's a big problem. And what we found over the years is if you're willing to do that and have those tough conversations, because you know it's in the client's best interest, that's what leads you to those relationships that are life-lasting. They know you will always do what is best for them. And it's only by doing what's best for them that we get to make our living. And we can make a great living by doing that. I just hate this short-sighted view that so many people come in and, I shouldn't say so many, but too many people come through that maybe will do anything to get a transaction. That will never work on our team. It's one thing to sell real estate. It's another thing to run a team and to treat that as a business. You can have a great practice where you sell a lot of real estate. Maybe you have some leverage, maybe you don't have some leverage. As you sell more homes, I would highly encourage you to get some leverage in terms of a transaction coordinator, someone that can help you do that, right? And then from there, you start to build out. A full-fledged team is a different thing because in most cases, you're still gonna be in production. There are some teams where maybe the rainmaker or the head of the team isn't in production. If you can get to that point, that's great, but it's a different model than the team where the rainmaker is in production. But even so, you have to make sure that you're able to balance your expenses every month and know what you're paying and knowing what lead platforms and lead generation and all those things and what that looks like. And are you getting a return from that every month without your production, right? Because if you take your production out of it and you can get a return on all of that with your agents, then you know you have a viable business. That is easier said than done. So the idea is always to make sure you're paying attention to what is happening because too many people go too long without looking at those numbers and then they have a rude awakening. And so you have to look at it every month and make sure you're looking at the expenses and make sure they make sense for your business. And then when the markets change, you have to change. You have to change your spend, you have to change personnel. Maybe you could have 3 or 4 levered people that are not in production. And then when the market changed, maybe that goes down to 1 or 1.5. It's a thing that requires a constant attention. Yeah, I think coming to KW was a great decision for me, right? And my family. Just the ability to be around people that think this way. For our team to negotiate the environment now and what we're trying to do, we're excited to be at Keller Williams. We're excited for what this market looks like moving forward because we know that while other teams are looking to cut back on services and do things, we're doing the opposite. We're adding more services to what we do to further enhance the client experience because we know if we can demonstrate the most amount of value, it really doesn't matter what else is going on because if you can demonstrate the most amount of value to those people in terms of whether they're buying and selling, you will always have a really great viable business. And we're excited because with all the changes that have happened in the business, we feel like that is the path towards the most viable and profitable business and that serves the people in the best way. Also, like what kind of a business do you want to run? I don't want to run a turn and burn business. I want to run a business that's based upon relationships with agents and clients, and that's the type of business I want to come to every day. I don't want to come to something where it's like everything's so transactional with people and clients and everything else. That's not what I want to run. That's not what I want to be. That to me is actually the exciting part about what's going on in the business now. Since the settlement, we feel like there's a lane for that is much more pronounced now than it was in the past.